The Tug of War, an Ndebele story. One peaceful morning, a hare called Umvundla, who lived by the Zambezi River, was bored. He felt like creating a bit of fun for himself, so he looked around to see what he could do. Suddenly he spotted two dignified old residents of the area, Rhino and Hippo. Now, Hippo, although aware of his ugliness, was very proud of his strength. Umvundla hopped up to the riverbank and called, "Oh, mighty one, why do you say that you are so strong? Even I, with my small size and thin legs, could beat you in a tug of war." Hippo ignored Hare with his ridiculous boasting, but Umvundla kept pestering him. At last, Hippo replied, in the hope of getting some peace and quiet, "A tug of war? All right, I will show you, my little long-eared nuisance." Umvundla danced with delight. He pointed to an old rounded dome of earth beyond the riverbank. "I bet I could pull you clear out of the water and over that termite hill," he taunted. Umvundla then dashed off to braid a long, strong rope. When he came back, he tied one end to Hippo's hind leg, saying, "When I shout pull from behind the hill, you must pull with all your might, for I shall surely beat you." Hippo thought that Umvundla's foolishness had at last got the better of him. He said nothing and settled down again in the water. In the warm shallows he soon dozed off. Now Umvundla took the other end of the rope and crept around to the other side of the hill, where he knew that old bull Rhino was asleep in the shade. He picked up some fierce little red ants from a nearby hole and quietly dropped them in Rhino's ear. Rhino awoke with a grunt and shook his head, trying to scratch his ears. "Good morning," piped Umvundla. "I was just coming to warn you of the ant's nest. Oh, I see one has crawled into your ear. May I help you to remove it?" And with a great pretense of concern, he actually pushed the ants in further. "That was most kind of you," said the unsuspecting Rhino. "Your small feet are just right, while mine are far too large for the job. You've no idea what trouble I have with ants." And on he grumbled in the way of cranky old men everywhere. "Well," replied the cheeky Umvundla, "my feet may be small, but they are very strong, stronger than yours, in fact. I'll show you just how strong I really am. I challenge you to a tug of war. I bet I can pull you right over this anthill and into the river." Old Rhino snorted with laughter, but at last he too was pestered into playing Umvundla's game. So Hare tied the other end of his rope around the Rhino's hind leg. Then he hurried to the top of the hill. He hid in a little hollow and called loudly, "Pull!" As he shouted, the ants began to bite deep inside Rhino's ear, and with a bellow of pain, Rhino charged off. Poor old Hippo had forgotten about Umvundla. He was dozing peacefully in his pool when there was this sudden, hard tug on his hind leg. Before he knew it, he was dragged out of the river and halfway up the hill. When Hippo realized what was happening, he dug in his heels and gave a mighty heave, and the great tug of war started in earnest. Each of the powerful animals strained with every muscle and worked themselves up into a fine fury. Umvundla laughed so much that he fell over and went rolling down the side of the anthill. When they saw him, the two great animals knew they had been tricked. Roaring with anger, They charged after Umvundla, hoping to trample him into the dust before he could tell the other animals how foolish they had been. As they charged, the hare waited until the last possible moment and then skipped out of the way. Hippo and Rhino were going so fast they couldn't stop. With a tremendous crash, they met head-on, hurting each other terribly. In a blind rage, they started to fight each other until they heard Umvundla, who by this time was weeping with laughter. Umvundla realized that at last the game was up, so he jumped up and sped off into the bush. He could hardly wait to tell the other animals how he had made fools of Hippo and Rhino. To this day, Rhino thinks the little red ants are still in his ears. Some say that the ants are so far down that they live in his brain, and this is why Rhino is so bad-tempered. As for Hippo, you will find him still searching the riverbanks at night, hoping to find Umvundla and throw him to the hungry crocodiles. That tricky little Umvundla